فيك دكتور الفضالة وتحية طيبة ليك وتحية طيبة لأستاذنا الحوتي كذلك سي إبراهيم الحوتي وجميع الأساتذة والأستاذات والطلبة والطالبات الأفاضل الذي حاضرين معنا اليوم إن شاء الله في هذا اللقاء. يعني كما تفضلت الدكتورة فإن الموضوع سيكون حول يعني الكتابة أو the writer's block اللي يسمى ممكن نسميه بالمصطلح باللغة العربية كذلك الحاجز النفسي الذي يمنع الكاتب من الكتابة. سأقوم بتقديم العرض باللغة الإنجليزية ولكن يعني لكم كامل الحرية أن تسألوا أسئلة باللغة العربية وأجيب باللغة العربية كذلك إذا تعذر الفهم. فقط من أجل المحافظة على نوع من أظن من أقول التناغم على المستوى الذهني حتى لا يعني لا أقفز من اللغة الإنجليزية للغة العربية. العرض or the presentation is going to cover the following points. I'll be first talking about just giving you just a bit of an overview of my academic and professional background. And then I'll just make a case for why this presentation is important and then just define it because there are, I would call it two camps, two fields of thought about it. Does it exist or does it not exist? And maybe some of the symptoms, especially with a special focus on social emotional health and well-being. And then just talk specifically about doctoral students' well-being and nest within the conversation about the doctoral students' well-being, nest the discussion about writing in the writer's block. Then spend a little bit of time on discussing the factors affecting the doctoral students' well-being. And then something that I kind of put together, more of I would call it a synthesis of some of the lessons I learned about the writer's block, and they called it the overlapping spheres affecting the writing experience. And then I'll just spend a little bit of time talking about my graduate experience, and I would also maybe touch upon even the postgraduate experience. And then some final tips. All right, Bismillah, let's begin. About me. So I have a PhD from the University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities, the United States of America, in comparative international development education with a focus on program evaluation. For me, this is the choice of the PhD also is very relevant to our conversation about the writer's block, because it was well designed. It was something that I had planned even something like 6 or 7 years before even getting into graduate school. I've always dreamt of having a degree that will allow me to go back to my home country and contribute not just to the educational development in Morocco, but the educational development in the MENA region. So after 15 years in the United States, I was able to achieve this vision. I also have a master's degree in teaching English as English language learners. So English language learners covers both ESL, English as a second language, and English as a foreign language from St. Cloud State University in Minnesota. I'm also licensed to teach in the K through 12 system in Minnesota, and again with a specific focus on teaching English. And then I also have a bachelor's degree in English from Agadir in Morocco that I obtained in 1995. As far as my professional experience is concerned, my current one is I have what call it a double hat. More of I'm a clinical associate professor at Arizona State University, but at the same time, I'm the director of a major project that's going on and it's being implemented as we speak in Morocco. It's called the Higher Education Partnership. And this is more of a partnership between Arizona State University and Moroccan universities funded by the United States International Development Agency to start for the first time, or maybe not to start for the first time, because maybe it's not capturing the story accurately, but really to develop the university capability in training primary school teachers. Uh, because before we used to have teachers who would graduate with a bachelor's degree and they go to specific centers for training teachers. Now the Moroccan government wants to make sure that anybody who wants to go into the teaching profession, they need to have a bachelor's degree in teaching. Before that, from 2014 to 2019, I was a senior researcher at the American Institutes for Research, and I conducted a good number of research studies, but at the same time of evaluations. And it was a huge, gigantic crash course in surviving the writer's block, because with deadlines, you don't have that luxury. If something has to be submitted, it will need to be submitted. I was also a research associate at the University of Minnesota with a special focus on assisting 5 states, actually 6 states, Midwestern states in the United States, in developing their capability in supporting learners with disability. And I think this is also a very useful experience because it brings into the conversation the dimension of social emotional learning and the dimension of brain science and learning sciences into our conversation about the writer's block. Uh, Before that, and while I was a graduate student at the University of Minnesota, I also worked full-time as a teacher of Arabic at the university from 2006 to 2012. So I was a lecturer there for almost like teaching specialist evolving to a lecturer for 6 years. I was also a teacher of English at another Minnesota university for 2 years, and the focus was on teaching analytical writing and introduction to rhetoric. But I also worked with ESL learners in the state. And also prior to that, I also worked as a high school teacher of English in Morocco from 1996 to 2003. So why is this presentation worth your time? Because for me, the writer's block is very much tied to writing and writer's efficacy. And this is very important for me. And because again, we're talking about a condition. We're talking about a condition that was observed by psychiatrists and psychologists, but at the same time, it's critical for us to also get to the roots of what this condition is and how we can prevent it. So that's for me the emphasis on writer's efficacy and as an important piece in this conversation. So writing efficacy is an important component of your identity and self-efficacy as a graduate student, all of you, and as a professional. Remember that your success during your graduate school depends on what you think about yourself, like whether you think you have the capability to write and write well. But even that one is just the tip of the iceberg, because it's also reflective of your ability to self-regulate and your ability to be self-aware and your ability to learn and your ability to prepare, so that you don't approach your graduate student experience as a victim, but you approach it as a leader. It's very important to keep that in mind, because anything could be done as long as you have a plan for it. And for me, the writer's efficacy is very important, just because maybe I have a bit of an anecdote here, is that when I went to Minnesota for the first time in 2003, and that's when I started grad school, that was also the first time when I used the keyboard. And because I was just used to handwriting and writing reports, like not reports, but maybe assignments using paper and pencil. And my challenge was not necessarily my ability, it wasn't a language challenge in the United States, but was more of a speed challenge. And self-efficacy is very important. Self-efficacy is about my ability to have a plan for 3 months. That by the end Hello? May I continue?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So self-efficacy, as I said, it was about my ability to have a plan for 3 months, that by the end of which I kind of transitioned from almost a novice keyboard user into a fast keyboard user in English, in Arabic. And I think that's very important indicator of self-efficacy. So self-efficacy, as you know, is an individual's assessment of one's ability to succeed in a particular domain or to perform a specific task that is linked to their motivation in that domain or task. It's one of the most powerful motivational predictors of how a person will perform at a given task. And self-efficacy becomes especially critical when domain-related tasks are demanding and motivational conditions are less than ideal. Writing is one such domain, especially in graduate school. So simply, what is a writer's block? And it, I think I just want to pause a little bit and want you to have a bit of have your own image of or your own experience of moments. I'm not going to say moments in singular, but moments when you experienced writer's block. And it's really captured succinctly here in the definition that says it describes limited capacity to begin or persist in working on a section or article of writing. And the definition is just open source from Psychology Dictionary. And it's simple, it doesn't need to be too complicated. Now, some of the symptoms of the writer's block, which also maybe helps with give you a sense of the evidence base of thinking and reflections about it, is really some of the seminal studies done in the 1970s, in the 1980s, at the Yale University, by Yale University psychologists Jerome Singer and Michael Barrios. So the purpose is to try to gain a more empirically grounded understanding of what it means to be creatively blocked with a specific focus on writer's block. So they found the following symptoms. They found that people who are kind of afflicted with those periods of writer's block, they experience symptoms like unhappiness, depression, and anxiety, increased self-criticism, and reduced excitement and pride at work, obsessive compulsive disorder, such as repetition, self-doubt, procrastination. Procrastination, just maybe I'm just explaining the word, which is just postponing and postponing and postponing again. You always want to put off the work to a later date, and perfectionism. They also experience during those periods of writer's block helplessness and aversion of solitude. And for all of those of you who have experienced graduate school, you know that it can be a lonesome experience. And this is why it's a symptom that's really worth paying attention to. Plus also a waning or flagging motivation in the ambition of the person experiencing the writer's block. One thing that's very important to keep in mind is that it's not an indicator that you're out of ideas or out of talent or that you're lacking in talent, and that you're not, it's not a sign that you're just being lazy or simply bored. It's a condition, and it's a condition that needs training and that needs to be prevented in a methodical type of way. So when we talk about doctoral students' well-being, I don't know if you're familiar with these statistics, but it's a very sobering one. Is that, and this is a statistic that has longitudinally been consistent, is that out of the 100% who get into graduate schools, only 50% graduate. This is, again, why am I sharing these statistics with you all? Because I wanted to drive home the point that those of you who experience the writer's block are not alone. And it's a condition, it's a situation that many, if not all of us, have experienced in one way or another, in one shape or another, at certain frequency, higher or lower, in our graduate student lives. And it's one of the factors contributing to some of the students deciding that graduate school is not their thing and they just move on. And it's sad, actually, except if it's done for really survival purposes. But many of those who graduate, they graduate without a degree, which is even worse because they graduate without a degree. And many of you who are familiar with the US system and with a lot of debt. And that's not a good way to graduate. So in all this, many of the studies of the psychological and physical well-being of doctoral students, they've noticed the following. They've noticed that many of the students suffer from high stress levels, uh, mental and health concerns such as depression. They also have alarming physical health symptoms, like, for example, upper respiratory infections and sometimes hypertension. They also have difficulties with maintaining relationships, and I'm sure you're not surprised, and maybe because you know why. And they have difficulties with engaging in social activities due to lack of time, financial resources, and motivation. And when you look at all these indicators, or maybe all these symptoms, they are all conducive to to loneliness, which is also one of the explaining factors of a writer's block. Now, these factors could be classified, especially like the affecting students' well-being. We could classify them or categorize them in terms of external factors and internal ones. Now, in the external factors, supervision is a very important, decisive factor that determines the extent to which a graduate student, is going to succeed or not, is going actually to be capable to write effective uh, uh, to write assignments effectively in timely manner and on time, and at the same time is a decisive factor even about the extent to which the graduate student will be able to get published, because as you know, and it's getting tougher as maybe as time moves on, is that now the expectation in many universities right now is that when you graduate, you at least minimum have to have 3 articles published during your doctoral time before you start applying for a position. And for me, that's a very tough requirement, taking into consideration all the circumstances, the conditions that many of the students go through, and let's say it also the lack of support of many of the students during the graduate student experience. But the supervision is really a very important factor deciding students' well-being and student success. Uh, Also the personal and social values. And here, when we're talking about the personal social values, I'd like also to always go back to how you exercise that sense of self-agency as a graduate student, which is not something that is just taught to you or you're coached into, but something that you should be coming to the university with. Because it seems to me that graduate school, or the PhD in particular, uh, you don't, there are things that you should have learned a long while before you get into the PhD program. Because on the PhD, once you're in the PhD, you're really learning, but producing at a much more intensive stage, or at a much more intensive rate. The most important factors here, especially when we're talking about the personal factors, are really the self-awareness, being awareness of your limitations, and also being awareness of your strengths. The self-regulation, your ability to control, I would say, for example, that sense of like that temptation to procrastinate. And self-awareness and self-regulation are important indicators also of motivation. They are also important indicators of empathy. And empathy is also an important indicator of your ability to have social relationships that are supportive of you during your graduate student experience. So as you will see, all these personal factors, they are very much interrelated. And the lack of one has an impact on your social well-being, and your health, mental and social and emotional well-being, which also affects your ability to handle the writer's block. Also the department in socialization, which is like, for example, the policy of the department to make sure that they integrate the graduate students, they identify the graduate students who are struggling, and they provide the necessary support in terms of writing to make sure that they deal effectively and successfully with the writer's blocks experience. Of course, the financial support and opportunities is something you're aware of, but also other determining factors of the students' well-being and is the motivation and the writing skills, self-regulatory strategies, and academic identity. Now, I highlighted the writing skills in blue because the writing skills here, it's a process and the product at the same time. If you have very good writing skills, if you write persuasively, if you write clearly, if you don't have any challenges in mastering basic writing and making sure that you write to the audience that you're uh, uh, that you want to tailor your message to, if you write in a timely manner, these are things that are going to contribute successfully to your success, and then it just creates a virtuous cycle that supports your social and emotional well-being. Academic identity is an important one because academic identity really has something to do with your self-esteem and with your academic image. And your academic identity and image also is tributary of your relationship within the department, of also your research track, and at the same time the writing track in general. So again, these things, while we're parsing one out of the other, but it's very important to, to underscore the fact that they are very much interrelated. Now, when you think about these spheres, you think about them in terms of three spheres here that all affect the writing experience or your writing experience, especially in the doctoral phase. One important statistic is that why supervision and coaching and support is critical is that 37% of the graduate students who are surveyed, they express the need uh, for help with writing. 20% of doctoral students needed support with research-related processes, and 18% need guidance regarding collaborations. And again, for me, these numbers, they all add up because when you writing in research, yes, while these are separable practices and disciplines, but for the most part, they feed off each other. Your ability to be involved in research, in writing collaboratives, in collaborations is not just a function of your writing skills, but also of your social skills and your ability to work with teams. Your academic identity, an important factor, as I said, of that influences your academic identity is that the students develop that identity by engaging in various academic activities, including socialization, writing, and research. And maybe just to open an important parenthesis here is that if you want to write and also you want to get published, it's yes, it kudos and congratulations to you if you can be a first author, or if maybe you can write your own article and you don't need anybody to write it with. But the most efficient, supportive, and way of getting you to write and build your self-confidence and self-efficacy as a writer is to write in groups. This is very important. To write as part of writing collaboratives. Be part of the community that shares your research interests, your academic interests, maybe your professional interests, and work with each other to write with each other. You're much more likely to get published, and by getting published, you're much more likely to also to hone your skills of writing to a specific audience, and you're also much more likely to gain confidence as a writer. And another important circle, which is personal, yes, in like your self-efficacy, your self-awareness, your self-regulation, your ability to demonstrate motivation, empathy, and social skills. While I'm putting them on the yellow personal sphere, but I do insist on the fact that they are not just innate, but they are acquired as well. And they are also a result or the reflection of the kind of the social interactions and in the socialization you have within the department, within the college, but within the community that you're part of. So back to my own graduate experience. Uh, just full disclosure, it wasn't easy. But again, what helped me was the fact that I was also aware that it wasn't easy, and I never approached it as a victim. Uh, and that was starting from 2006, and I'm only talking about my graduate PhD experience and not the master's experience. Because I did my PhD while working full time, and I also did my so I worked on my PhD, but I was also required to work 40 hours a week. I did my PhD while I was blessed with having two kids during my doctoral time. But I approached my PhD and my PhD writing experience with a huge amount of deliberateness and intentionality about why I'm pursuing a PhD in the first place. I told you earlier in the presentation that if I didn't go for this doctorate, I would not have gone for a PhD, period. Just because I was offered a very nice, well paying job supervising teachers of English in Minnesota a while back. So I really didn't need to go for a PhD. But really, my PhD in international development with a focus on program evaluation and working with and the development of educational systems was a dream come true. So even in my life, in those moments of challenge, when I felt like I was challenged at the level of writing, I never lost sight of the fact that I pursued my PhD because of a personal mission, a mission that's related to national and international development, and I'm going to do what it takes to achieve that goal. Uh, the PhD experience, and again, thanks to the involvement of faculty members and my colleagues during the PhD program, was also an experience that was rich in terms of the writing assignments. So it wasn't just the simple academic writing assignments that you get in the courses you take, but also I was very much involved in conferences, regional, national, international. I was very much involved in professional experiences with teachers in the United States, in outside the United States. I was very much involved in working with governments in other countries, which forced me to write reports. And writing reports and writing academic articles, these are the parameters of success vary. That ability to adjust the parameters of success depending on the audience is also one of the factors that contributed to my sense of self-efficacy as a writer, which helped me address the challenges of the writer's block. Uh, Other things that I'd like to discuss regarding my graduate experience, that I had supportive advisors and champions throughout the doctoral program. And I do remember one thing that my PhD advisor told me after I graduated. He said, "Mohammed, you're not lucky. You make your own luck." And that 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 statement that the advisor shared with me had a deep impact on me, because I'm sure you're all aware of I think this saying that we don't plan to fail, but we fail to plan. Meaning that your graduate school experience, your success in terms of your writing, really is contingent to a large extent on the extent to which you've been planful before even the graduate experience and throughout the graduate experience. Not just planful in terms of the major that you want to go after, but at the same time in terms of the relationships you build, in terms of the courses you take, in terms of the kind of professional experiences you get involved to, and even planful about the dose of writing you force yourself to get into every single day, because this is very much related to a later point that I mentioned, which I refer to as the writer's stamina. Uh, as I said, I experienced all kinds of reviewers. I would call them the humans, the great reviewers, and the jerks. And but again, I was told that when you go and when you submit your articles for publications, you need to make sure you have developed a thick skin to deal with the experience, because it's not always nice. You're not always going to hear the rosiest of words. Some comments are very harsh, and some comments are objective, and some comments just do not make sense. But you have to learn to accept all comments with a gigantic uh, heart and willingness to adapt and change, and at the same time with the uh, uh, don't be too thin skinned, because if you are thin skinned, you're just going to give up very quickly. And a very important also piece or tip that helped me is that you read like your life depends on it. Sometimes we tend to dissociate writing from reading. If you don't read much, don't expect that what do we say in Arabic, الوحي سينزل أن زمن الوحي انتهى. If read like just, I think there is no better wording for it. Read like your life depends on it, because again, by being a reader, especially for example Arabic speakers, you can read not just in English, but read in English and in Arabic, because that gives you a huge intellectual advantage, especially in your writing. If you're not reading, then you have to do something about it to make sure that you help fix your writer's block. I was also intentional about leveraging my multilinguistic background or multilingual background to gain a thinking or a conceptual edge. You know, in Morocco, many of us speak Arabic, French, and many of us speak Tamazight, and then we speak English and Spanish. For me, that's a major blessing. That's a major asset. Why? Because it gives your brain so much elasticity in terms of getting to the right concepts, in terms of seeing things differently, in terms of using a multitude of lenses to approach phenomena, that makes you a very fresh and refreshing writer. So again, I'm all addressing an Arabic speaking audience that understands me reading and speaking in English, and you already share some of that advantage as well of speaking at least two languages. So use them to your own benefit. Building your writing stamina. I'm sure many of you are practice some kind of a sport, and you know that you just don't get to run the marathon if you don't start get into the 5K and even lower, and it starts steps by steps. Don't wait until you get into PhD to write your first report or assignment, and just do not be dissuaded or intimidated or just subdued by the fact that maybe your writing, at least according to you, is not good enough. The only way to improve is just by writing, and just writing purposefully. When I say writing purposefully, you write with a specific you have to have a writing routine every day, and with a specific time. And even if you stay in front of your screen just for 1 hour a day, that's enough, and move on, because that's the only way you're going to develop that stamina. And as you know, stamina in writing is very much also dependent on practice and very much dependent on reading. And also seek as aggressively as possible collaborative work. If you don't reach out virtually or physically to other members of the community that shares your interest, I think you're very much more likely to continue to deal with the challenges of the writer's block. You have to reach out.
دكتور محمد، سوري للمقاطعة، بس عشان مراعاة الوقت 5 دقائق وننتقل للأسئلة. 5 minutes.
Okay. 5 minutes? Okay, inshallah. So again, one important antidote, I would call it, to writer's block is make sure you create important milestones. I remember that when I was blessed with the news that that my wife was expecting my second child, I committed that PhD dissertation will have to be defended before he comes to the world, before he was born. I think that was an important motivator. I only had something like 6 months to finish. I'm talking about finishing because the dissertation took something like what, 3 years of preparation. But really the final writing, the improvement in the revision of the paper of the dissertation, I made sure that my child comes to planet Earth having me already defended my dissertation. That was an important motivator. How I worked throughout the dissertation process, there are many opportunities to participate in local, regional, and international conferences. And they were my milestone. Every paper I submitted to these events was actually a paper that took me a step further into writing my dissertation. Every commitment, every abstract that I submitted to conference organizers brought me a step further into the conference, into the dissertation completion. So for me, this is a very important indicator of intentionality and planning, and just in making sure that you align all the stars in favor of you completing your work. And then I always knew that my best writing doesn't begin right away, but it begins to crystallize after the third draft, which means that your writing in the beginning might sound, look very disjointed. Don't worry about it. Just write it down and move on, do something else, and come back. And many of you here will come back and they find that they come with a fresh mind, fresh perspective, and they continue on chiseling until they get the draft that meets their expectations. And do not be afraid to engage as many peer reviewers as possible, because they are the ones who are capable of seeing your blind spots. Finally, and these are some tips from the Arizona State University Graduate College. And these are tips that are important for the social emotional well-being in general, but they are also important for addressing the writer's block. I don't think that suffering through the experience is going to be any help to your brain. So make sure that you create a sleep routine and you stick to it. Make sure you get out of your study space and sit or walk outside for 15 minutes. This is very important, so that it's just like you hit the reset button on your brain. Choose an exercise routine that matches your need. Make sure that you're physically active. This is very important for you working in the graduate school. Learning a good breathing technique for calming your body. Again, it doesn't have to be big fancy yoga, but anything that gets your heart to be paced right, and your heart to be aligned with, like, having some lucid thinking is very helpful. And I would call it good breathing techniques will help. Remind yourself of the bigger meaning of your work. Are you doing a PhD just because it sounds good, it looks good, or you're doing a PhD because it means something? Again, that pursuit of meaning is a very important motivator. Make sure that you watch what you eat. Don't get into too much sugar, because again, that's not really a way of being very productive or helping you even sit still. Identify your circle of trust. We're all vulnerable in one way or another. Make sure that you have a group of friends that you trust and that trust you, and that you're willing to be vulnerable with, and to share what you're strong at, but at the same time to have them point to where you need to improve and what you need to work on. Connect with other graduate students. Again, online, in person, doesn't matter, but you need to stay connected. Make sure that you have clear line of communication with your mentor and supervisor, so that you know what he or she expects from you, and make sure that you meet those expectations. And share your needs, because if you don't share them, nobody will know about them. And do something that's not graduate school every week. Being a doctoral student, you're not condemned to be a graduate student. You're a human being before that. So you got some, I don't know, other volunteering activities, help in the neighborhood, do something else. Because it's amazing how many fresh ideas you get from getting into entirely different settings. And that also explains the innovativeness of your thought. I guess that's it, Dr. Fadala. I think that was it for my presentation. I'm sorry if it took longer, but this is an exciting topic to me.
Shukran, Dr. Mohammed, for this great presentation and for sharing your personal experience as well. يعني all the symptoms that you are sharing I faced it personally during my PhD. As I mentioned before, يعني I went to do my PhD with 5 children, and the youngest was 2 months old. So we all faced these symptoms. بس بعد حالياً as a researcher in my own organization, and more specifically with this COVID-19 crisis. وهذا هو كان هدف يعني اللقاءات اللي ننظمها أسبوعياً. مرة ثانية أشكر دكتور إبراهيم الحوطي على تنظيم وتشجيعي أنا على أن إحنا نستمر في هذه اللقاءات، أن إحنا how to يعني have this committee that support each others. يعني اللقاء مش بس هذا الساعة الأسبوعية، لكن في أنا أشوف أن في working groups، في دكتور إبراهيم مع باحثين ثانيين شكلوا مجموعات يلتقون أونلاين مع بعض على حسب الأهداف. طبعاً عندي أسئلة كثيرة، بس أنا حابة أسمع وأعطي فرصة للموجودين يشاركون بأسئلتهم. بس النقطة المهمة دكتور أن ارتباط هذه المرحلة من حياة الباحث بالويل بينج، يعني الايجنسي، الامباثي، الافيكاسي، all of these terms really important. And I wrote this in the chat section. You mentioned the academic identity. We had 2 sessions مع الدكتور خالد عرار about and it was really an interesting concept حتى يعني للباحثين إنه يفكرون فيها من قبل لا ينتهون من دراسة الماجستير أو دراسة الدكتوراه. I'll stop here. I want to leave time for participants to share either their personal experience or questions as well.
Wonderful. Okay.
So feel free to.
دكتورة أسماء.
تفضل دكتور.
يعطيك العافية. أنا عندي بس مشاركة بسيطة، يعني تجربة جربتها وما زلت مستمر عليها، أعتقد ساعدتني وايد على موضوع الكتابة. وكذلك عندي كم سؤال طرى في بالي والدكتور محمد كان يتكلم. من الأمور المعينة على مسألة الكتابة الأكاديمية أن الواحد ما يشعر أنه هو بروحه في هذه الرحلة. يعني أكيد كل طالب دكتوراه في عنده من زملاء اللي بلشوا معاه رحلة الدكتوراه سواء في القسم العلمي أو في الكلية. التعاون مع بعض والمشاركة مع بعض والعمل مع بعض يساعد بشكل وايد كبير. أنا أذكر كانت عندي إحدى الزميلات اللي كانت معي في نفس الجامعة وتقريبا نكتب في نفس التخصص، كنا نحط تايم لاين حق بعض وكنا نتابع بعض وكنا نتشارك مع بعض. فأعتقد مثل هذا النوع من التشارك ومن التعاون يساعد الواحد في رحلته في الكتابة الأكاديمية، لأن الواحد ما يبي يشعر أنه هو وحيد في هذه الرحلة، لأن الرحلة طويلة جدا. رحلة الدكتوراه ما تبدي يعني مو مثل برنامج الماجستير اللي هو مجرد سنة واحدة أو مجرد 9 شهور في بريطانيا. احنا نتكلم عن 4 سنوات 5 سنوات. إذا ما لقى أحد معاه في نفس القسم العلمي أو في نفس الكلية أو يكتب في نفس المجال، والحمد لله الحين وسائل التواصل سهلت التواصل عن بعد يعني، فأعتقد أن هذه من الأمور اللي تساعد على مسألة الكتابة الأكاديمية أكثر في العمل. تتكلم الدكتور محمد عن موضوع الأودينس. السؤال اللي أنا طرى في بالي، شلون أنا أقدر أعرف الأودينس ملوتي إذا كنت في بداية رحلتي في رسالة الدكتوراه؟ فهو كان يتكلم عن موضوع جزء من الرايتنج سكيلز is to writing for your audience. شلون أقدر أعرف الأودينس بالضبط يعني؟ شكرا.
Okay.
تفضل دكتور.
Think it's for me the analogy that has always helped Ibrahim is that when you're a writer, think of yourself as a lawyer in front of a jury. Always, and that's how I always thought about it, and it helps because when you're a lawyer in front of a jury, you're making a case, and when you're making a case, you want to drive home a certain point. You want to persuade in one direction, maybe change opinions about one other direction. So you decide on that. You decide on the kind of audience that is more of a fit with the kind of argument that you're trying support or maybe the argument that you're trying to maybe refute or maybe argue against. One other thing also is the researching. When you research your topic, you're going to research also the community that is interested in this topic. It's very important because uh, again, each topic has a specific community, and when you do a bit of a research, you find journals that are just focused on that topic, regardless of how very nuanced you think it is. There is a journal out there that is there for it. And again, when you're part of that journal, in that community, you get a sense of that audience as well. One thing I want to warn any of our colleagues against is that sometimes you get so used to singing to the choir and saying things to an audience who agrees with you that you start losing your argumentative edge. Uh, from to have to force yourself into thinking about an audience that is hostile, that's willing to pick apart all your arguments and figure out a way to make sure that you write effectively. Again, it's both. It's research about the community, but at the same time, the kind of image that I use always, which is thinking of myself as a lawyer in a court.
شكرا دكتور يعطيك العافية. If I may comment on this, يعني حتى دي النقطة مهمة بعد إكمال الدكتوراه. يعني أنا حالياً سواء في الكتابة أو في إعطاء يعني محاضرات أو المشاركة في بانل, it's always important to think about the audience. يعني الحين أكتب مقالات أسبوعية لجريدة الراية. الأودينس هم طبعاً اللوكال, لكن أفكر في general audience. أنا ما أكتب لأشخاص أكاديميين فقط, ولكن صناع القرار, الجورناليست, الميديا. فهذه فعلا الأخذ بالاعتبار الأودينس سواء في إعطاء محاضرة أو الكتابة نفسها, ونفس الشيء سواء باللغة العربية أو باللغة الإنجليزية. فهذه جدا النقطة مهمة.
Audience affects the level of opacity of the words you use. You know, they call it the fogginess index in academia, that sometimes some academic papers are very dense and sometimes very opaque, and the words are very, at times, esoteric. And those words in that text will not help you if you're dealing with policymakers. Again, this is very important to keep that thing in mind.
Excellent.
يعني أنا أعتقد أن هذه المحاضرة ممكن تكون المفروض موديل لما تاخذها بالجامعة. لأن أذكر في جامعة هول يونيفرسيتي سووا لنا ريسيرش سبورت كلاس, كان باسم فيل, بس خذونا من الصف الأولى of your dissertation until على قولتهم الريفرنسز. أنا عندي سؤال بسيط يتعلق بالريد read until and don't wait على قولتهم للوحي, لأن أتوقع هذا أكثر نصيحة سمعناها. ولكن reading يعني مرات إحنا نشعر إنه really time consuming. Sometimes you feel like really lost. Sometimes you think that you are not reading, you know, effectively. So I just wanted your advice in terms of like steps, because I was talking with a friend of mine and he said, oh, listen, don't read the article. This is not good for you. Just read the abstract and go to the discussion and stuff like that. And sometimes you want to read the whole articles, especially when you are writing your dissertation. So on the other hand, it's kind of like you feel you are like saying to yourself, you want to write for 2 hours today, but you spend 5 hours just reading and then you give up and go to sleep. So I just want to hear what you think about this issue.
So the key word, Faraj, is at what point you reach your saturation phase. As you know, and this is not something that anybody should be ashamed of, but ask any writer or any reader or any of the scholars is that they don't read all the articles. But here, don't misunderstand me. They've reached a stage when they know that there is so much repetition that maybe they could skip specific sections. But at the beginning stage, I would highly advise you to read as much as possible until you reach saturation. Because again, this is where, when you become a researcher in your field of interest, in your field of choice, there is going to be a stage, Faraj, when you become an expert. because in your group, you're going to be the one who has read most about that specific topic. One of the perks of being an expert is that you could afford to bypass, skip certain things because you've heard them, you've seen them. So again, have the courage and also have the peace of mind to skip, but not in the beginning. Make sure that in the beginning you want to reach saturation, conceptual saturation, which is you've seen the phenomenon, you've been studying from various facets and perspectives, and at some point you just read into to verify. I think it's critical to keep this saturation criterion in mind.
أعتقد موضوع الريدنج
Thank you.
تكرر. شكرا دكتور، شكرا. أعتقد موضوع الريدنج تكرر أكثر من مرة أخوي إبراهيم. Maybe we need to organize something around this topic. Again, I will share my personal experience. في بداية الدكتوراه طبعا كانت literature review، فالسوبرفايزر قالت لي read in the unknown، فحسيت إنه يعني خذ وقت طويل، و يعني حتى ممكن لو يعني تقعد في القراءة أحس إنه كان يعني بستمر لمدة سنة مش 5 أو 6 شهور. فمهم إنه يعني we need to be aware when to stop. وبعدين القراءة مش بس فترة الليترشر ريفيو، حتى during الميثودولوجي، حتى during الداتا كولكشن، حتى لما أنا أسوي الداتا أناليسيز when I write my analysis and finding chapter. So I don't think it's يعني phase وتنتهي، بس ابدأ بالليترشر ريفيو of course, identify key references, have a clear argument and build on it. بس ما تقعد مثلا أشهر تستمر وبعدين تكون القراءة مستمرة طول فترة الدكتوراه، مش بس أول مرحلة. ما أدري إذا حد حاب يشارك عن موضوع الريدنج أو ننتقل للسؤال. عليكم السلام.
أولا أشكر القائمين على هذه المنتديات، ويعني بالنسبة لي أعتبر أنها very interesting for researchers. and شكرا محمد على مشاركتك الجميلة جدا. يعني احنا دائما محتاجون أننا نسمع التجارب الشخصية كما كتبت. It's very interesting to hear experiences, because that's what will help young researchers and novice researchers to persevere. And that's actually the point behind public speaking. You know, public speaking, I think, was created in the US to help people get inspiration from experiences. Just want to comment on reading, because that's something, as Dr. Asmaa and Dr. Mohammed and the others who intervened said. One thing that we should keep in mind about reading is that a doctoral student or researcher, PhD researcher, should always know that they have a limitation. They are acting within a given time scope, and they shouldn't like let themselves go with the flow and read everything they have at hand. What happens is that the moment you kind of determine what your research objectives are, you should read to the purpose. Your reading should be purposeful. It is very important that your reading should be purposeful. And right. The most important thing to do is, as you read, you take notes. And you take notes in kind of logs that are well structured and well organized. And you have in mind that these logs or these readings or these notes will be used later. They will be used in a beneficial way. You don't have to read everything. And maybe my advice, based on my personal experience and what I share with my students, is that it is always important, once you have decided about the topic, generally speaking, even if you have not decided about the theoretical framework, it is or your research questions, it is always important to read studies from journals, because what happens to a lot of researchers, especially in our country, for example, I know that a lot of students in Morocco, They read every book that talks about the topic, and that's problematic sometimes. So maybe the best way is to read research papers from journals, research papers that are related to your topic. That will help you. It will help you first structure your research, and it will help you get to the things you need to get to. And that's it. Thank you very much for everything.
سؤال محمد بدر, to what extent a coach or a supervisor can affect the researcher's work and well-being? I have a quick answer, بس دكتور محمد أكيد عنده إجابة.
I'm sure there is I'll just use the analogy that coaches in sport get millions and millions of dollars for a reason, because they could build or crush a player, which is the same. Many graduate students and many doctoral students, and I told you, like, it's an important sobering fact that 1 out of 2 students drop out. And sometimes the quality of coaching and supervision is to blame for that. So it's a huge.
I totally agree, Doctor. And I was so lucky to have 2 supervisors. One of them still in contact, and she's a friend and a mentor even after my graduation.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the same with you, Doctor. I know your supervisor. She's an amazing.
And you mentioned my supervisor, and this is maybe where my luck hit, is that she wasn't my supervisor. She was never my supervisor. She was my champion. And it's a faculty member that took a keen interest in me, and she was willing to invest time in really working with me. And this is what my piece of advice for all my colleagues here is, that if your supervisor is a dangerous social misfit, make sure you get rid of them, because they'll be the end of your graduate school.
Yeah, and I think I was so lucky, a female from the Arab world going to Cambridge with 5 children. I found someone who believed in me and encouraged me when even I was in doubt in myself. So you need that type of supervisor to help you believe in yourself as well. سؤال نوف وننهي. ما تشوف السؤال هني مكتوب بس يمكن عليكم السلام أهلين.
Actually it was more of a request than a question. أول شيء يعطيكم ألف عافية. أنا أمانة يعني التقيت فيكم بطريقة الصدفة عن طريق تويتر، وكان عن طريق ريتويت، وأمانة أجد نفسي جدا 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 محظوظة. I'm so lucky. Very informative, very beneficial, and I really wish that you can arrange some workshops that are more focused on the reading process. I believe that also others have shared the same point. At some moment we feel like we're a bit overwhelmed and we don't know where to start or when to stop and what to read and so on and so forth. So I think it's just a suggestion, and I really hope that you can arrange something like that. That's all what I wanted to say, and thank you so much.
شكرا نوف، شكرا على المشاركة والاقتراح، وفعلا جلد الموضوع أكثر من مرة، وإن شاء الله مع إبراهيم نرتب لقاء مرة ثانية. الهدف من هذا اللقاء هو ساعة أسبوعية يعني يكون في support during this crisis, بس to build a community. فfeel free to communicate with each other and to help supporting each other, because يعني لما الواحد أحس إنه يساعد غيره أكيد بيكون في benefit له. بالضبط. مرة ثانية أشكرك دكتور. I know it was last minute. سعيدين بالمحاضرة اللي أعطيتها، وبنشارككم بالسلايدات وبالفيديو بإذن الله.
I just want to add one point which is very important. It's about the academic identity. Now, whoever chooses to have a master's degree or a PhD cannot just simply think of it as a privilege, but they have to think of it as a responsibility that comes with cost. If you're not prepared to pay the cost, then you have to really think twice about your choice. It's critical that you keep that in mind, because yes, we talk about rights, but it's important, especially be it reading or writing, it will require an intensive I would call it the regimen of reading and writing to make sure that you're up to par, and at the same time that you're a representative of the program. You're an exemplary representative of your program. Because again, those of us who go to the US or Canada, or maybe even our universities in the MENA region, we know that we have a responsibility, not just for us here in the present, but in the future as well. And if we're mediocre, and if we don't do what it takes to achieve excellence, we will pass mediocrity to the next generation. It's our job as young people, and here I'm using young in a very broad way, like young in minds. I hope that we pass this I will call it pass this legacy of excellence to the next generation. Some stuff, whatever it takes, you have to sweat to get it. You really have to sweat to get it. Not everything you wish is easy to get. So just keep that in mind if you're in the doctoral program.
شكرا دكتور. وفي بس أجاوب على السؤال اللي شلون يتواصلون معنا. أساميكم already انضافت للمجموعة، فبتوصلكم الإيميلات الأسبوعية، وإذا حابين ما يعني نشيل اسمكم ما توصلكم هذه الإيميلات، بعد ردوا على الأخ إبراهيم، بس بتوصلكم كل هذه الانفيتيشنز، يعني ما في داعي تسجلون مرة ثانية. شكرا ويعطيكم العافية. مع السلامة.